My name is Audre Etsitty. For the past 3 years, going on 4 now, I've served in the capacity of a data extension specialist at the Lindgren office. When I started my educational career, I actually started out here at Dine College, and I attained an associate in business management because I thought to myself that I want to own my own business one day. But after I got done with my AA, I thought to myself, well, it would be nice to own my own horse business. So after much research and deliberation and consideration of all the equine programs in the U.S., I decided on going to Colorado State University. Their program there is very general within the equine industry, so by that I mean that they covered a broad range of topics. I was able to partake in therapeutic riding courses, float training, a lot of these opportunities that U of A otherwise couldn't offer because they focused mainly on racing. And down in Las Cruces, their equine program focuses on reproduction. So they do a lot of research in that area. But what I'm going to cover today is parts of the bit and parts of the saddle. And I think it's important because as you are building yourself up as a horseman or a horsewoman, you got to take the time to learn what tools you're using. You wouldn't use a wrench if you needed to use a screwdriver to unscrew a screw. And then there's also different parts of these bits that work together where to attain what you want, but for the example I make, I talk about men and how they like to fix their vehicles. Some want a Cummins engine, some want an Ellis transmission to make up their Stacy. So, and it has a lot to do with self-reflection. Where are you at as a horseman and a horsewoman? And what tools do you need to grow? So our previous presenter covered on what he learned with starting colts. So I'm just going to go ahead and cover the snaffle bit. There's 2 main types of bits. There's going to be your snaffle, which is a lateral bit. I'll explain that later. And then there are your leverage bits, which have the shank and the curb. And then there are all different tools in between, like your hackamore. There's no bit, just the nose band. And then you have your other tools like your tie downs, and then your martingales. But normally what would happen, the way I was taught, was you start out a horse in a snaffle bit. Can anybody tell me why? Any ideas, wild guesses?
Training.
Yeah, it's a baby step. You don't learn to read in one day. You have to learn your ABCs, right? So think of this like the ABCs. This has to do with leverage. Not leverage, lateral flexion. Before your horse even learns how to stop, he has to first learn to give to the bit. He has to know what that means. So with this bit, you don't pull directly back. To stop a horse, you're going to use your reins to bring his head around, which is teaching him to give. And then you're going to kick on the back side of his stomach to disengage his hind end. So what's going to happen is his legs are going to cross over in the back. And that's your brakes when you're starting out with a snaffle bit. Since it's lateral flexion, this bit is going to be moving inside the horse's mouth from side to side. It's not going to be braking. If you tend to pull back, you're going to have the tendency to pinch your horse's mouth. this is a bad example. I use this as a bad example because you're using this bit side to side. With this kind of headstall, it's going to slip off your horse. And I've had that happen to me before I even learned anything about this. This is a one-ear headstall. What you should be using always on the lateral bit, especially a snaffle bit, is a headstall with a brow band. And that just means that it has this piece here on the crown. The parts of your headstall, most of us see this. It's most common in the stores. We see our friends, our family members riding with them. But this is the crown of the headstall. This is the cheek piece. It's adjustable so that you could adjust it to your horse's needs. Some horses have big heads, some horses have small heads. And then you have the brow band. This secures the headstall on your horse. So this is something that you should be utilizing with your snaffle bit. Now there are also different types to the bit, or different parts. You have your bars, which rest inside the horse's mouth. Now if you look inside the horse's mouth, there's a gap between the incisors and the molars, right? There's just gum there. This is where the bit sits, the bars of the bit. If your bars are wide, it's going to have a little dull pressure on your horse. It's not going to be sharp. If this were any skinnier, say like this piece here, this is going to have a more severe effect on your horse's mouth than this one. So we only have the rings on the snaffle bit, and this right here is the mouthpiece. How this functions in your horse's mouth is when you take lateral pressure and move side to side. If you pull straight back, it's going to cave like this, and then it's going to hit the upside portion of the horse's mouth. So with using this, you also do not want one of these. This is called the curb strap. You don't want to use a chain ever on your snaffle bit. You're going to want to use a straight leather piece like this. And that's just to keep it in place, because when you start moving side to side, you don't want this bit to slip through the horse's mouth. It has happened, it is possible. So for safety precautions, that's why you use your curb strap. How many of you, by a show of hands, use split reins? How many of you just use your regular roping reins? Anybody else? Yeah, okay, so the hardest, one of the things I had to learn when I started out was rein management. Because my entire life, before I ever started trading poles, I come from a rodeo family, so I always had the roping reins. So when it came time to use my split rein, it was really hard for me to learn about lateral flexion, because sometimes it would get too big and sometimes it would get too small. So as I was learning this and I was having a hard time, my teacher at the time, her name was Bobby Walton. She was a woman out from Texas. She now owns her own horse business there. So what she told me, I'm like, why do I even have to use this? Why can't I just go back to my roping reins? She said, you're using a lateral bit. You need to learn about lateral flexion if this helps. What you're going to do is you're going to use your thumbs and you're going to slide your hands. So you're on your horse and you want to disengage him. You don't want to confuse him because he's a baby. He's still learning how to read. He doesn't know how to respond to certain pressures yet. He's got a clean slate. You have to do your best to start him out right. So instead of pulling on both sides, you're going to slide, make room, come down and pull on one side. So you can disengage him to the left. Same goes for the right. And then, because my horse was a little lazy, She said it's also a perfectly good tool to use as a whip. You just bring around and tap him lightly on the back. She said you need to start learning how to do, practice rain management is what she told me. So since then, I have a certain preference as well. So my reins that I like to use are a little thicker in weight, just so that I could feel the weight of it. That's how I learned. And then as you start learning yourself, you develop your own preference. Like for roping, this is the texture that I like the most. And when I rope, all I do, I like the waxy texture of this braided rein. I don't know why, I prefer it the most. I just put it on my ring finger, and I use a curved bit. So this is also known as a leverage bit. With this leverage bit, you don't have to have a brow band. You can use a 1-ear headstall or a 2-ear headstall. The reason behind that is once your horse learns his ABCs in this bit, you can start teaching him using less pressure. This bit requires less pressure, and it functions differently. This means that you don't have to try as much, you don't have to do as much when you graduate into this. So this is preschool, you're going up to grade school in this. The parts of the bit are different. This is the same, the mouthpiece. This is a curved bit because it has this portion right here, and it also has a roller, a copper roller. Copper is the most salivating piece that you could put in a horse's mouth. It produces much saliva, and then he can also play with this. So it could calm some horses down. Sometimes when you have a bit like this, you'll hear them rolling it in their mouth with their tongue. And then we go off to the side. This is the purchase of the bit. From this mouthpiece on up, it's called a purchase. From the mouthpiece on down, this part of the shank is called, this is the shank. So there's important aspects to this. There's usually, the general rule is a 1-to-3 ratio. That means for every 1 inch of this purchase, there's 3 inches down here. And this has to do with the amount of pressure that you put on your horse's mouth. So this all correlates. The longer the shank you have, so the straighter and longer the shank you have, the more pressure you're going to be putting on your mouth. Horse's mouth is going to be quicker. So when I pull the reins back like this mouthpiece is going to hit his palate, what we have up here in our mouth, that's going to hit his palate. And then this curved chain is going to tighten on his chin. And then on top of that, since we're moving the bit around, do you see that action on the cheek of the headstall? That is going to put more pressure on his ears. The horse has very sensitive nerves behind his ears, so you're going to be putting pressure on that. So then once you're transferring your horse from this bit to here, you're going to have to go slow because it's something different in his mouth. It functions differently under pressures of his face, so you need to start slow. You don't need to put that much pressure on him. There's also different options. This is a solid mouthpiece. Some mouthpieces can collapse. There can be hinges right here and they can collapse. But this is the most severe, so that me personally as a rider, I use more leg pressure than I use rein pressure. So that's how I ride, that's how I direct my horses. So that's why this one is a solid mouthpiece. This is my choice so that I don't have to be fiddling with his head a lot. I use a lot of my body when I ride my horses. This again is adjustable. These come in different designs, I have to buy pink crystal or something pink because the men in my family end up stealing my tack. So they have not touched this since I bought it in high school. And then you have your other tools. You have your other tools like your tie down. This is most commonly seen on ropers, and sometimes grandma will be out herding her sheep in this. The main purpose for this tie down is to it directly affects the length of stride of your horse. It is not intended to keep your horse's head down low. You see a lot of people, they like to shorten this end so that their horse's head stays low. And I see a lot of ropers doing that so that they can see over the head of their horse. But that all goes back to training. When you start your horse, you're supposed to teach him to give to the pressure of the bit so that he carries his head down low, learns to collect himself. It has to do with collection. But that's the main purpose. So when I rope and I'm using my tie down, I watch my calves. I watch to see how fast they're running. If I have a fast calf, if the calves are running fast, I will lengthen this so that my horse has a longer stride. If they're slow coming out of the box and they're just trailing out, I will shorten this to shorten his stride. But that's the main purpose behind this one. And then you have things like your martingale. So I never used to use the martingale. I didn't start playing with it until I rode for a man his name was Gabe Garrison, and he owned his own reining business in Loveland, Colorado. For my degree program, I had to do an internship. And horse training was something I avoided. I really didn't want to go into it. I thought I would find my passion in therapeutic riding because I thought it would be really rewarding. And when I took the class, it was a lot of work. And so I didn't feel that sense of reward. But one semester, I needed one extra class, and colt training was the only thing left open to take. So I enrolled in it. I learned a lot. I learned a lot more about myself as an individual. But that prompted me to take this job offer. And what happened there was I did my morning chores every day I went to work. I would clean out all of the stalls, the show horse stalls, the runs outside. And he used this martingale on his younger horses that he was starting out. And that's when I started to experiment with it. But how you use this is this is put over the neck of the horse, and it just sits by the withers. This comes down in between and attaches to the cinch, the front cinch of the horse. And then these come up. You attach your reins through here. It adds a little weight to your reins, but when you go to pull on your reins, it brings the horse's head down and teaches him collection. So you have to use your body to push your horse underneath himself. Over time, if you're really good with your hands, you wouldn't need this. Your horse will be able to carry his head level or lower than at the point where you would like. This here is my Beetle Hackamore. It just has the nose band and then this leather curb strap. I like to use this on new horses that I have coming in just to test their training levels and how well they respond to my body. My cues from my legs, from my seat, from my hands. And then I like to start out my younger horses in this. This solely just puts pressure on the nose and the chin as well as the ears. And then I also like to use my split reins with it. Personally, when I start out horses, like I said, I ride a lot more with my leg pressure. So I like them to get in tune with my body so that I will be fighting with them later on in life. They're more manageable. Does anybody have any questions of the tools so far? Like how the bit functions?
Do you ever use a tie down when you use your snaffle?
No, I don't, because I don't see anybody using a tie down with their snaffle. But this is, like I said, your first training bit. So your horse has to learn to give the pressure. You have to learn to work with your horse, and this comes back to self-reflection. How good are you? Where do you feel that you need to improve on? What do you feel that you need to learn more about? And that's where I learned a lot from using this bit. I use this as demonstration purposes, but I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Myler bit system. There's a man out there who has a bit system a little differently than this. So he does follow the same concepts, but it doesn't, his snaffle bit actually has a little roller on here so that it doesn't collapse in the mouth, it doesn't pinch. And his philosophy is clear-cut communication between the rider's hand. And so I use his system, but that's just me as a rider.
Do you ever use snaffles with different diameter bars, like a little smaller than what you have there?
Okay, my bars are usually a little bit chubbier than this. So, like I said, the thinner the bars are, the more severe it is on your horse's mouth. And so mine would probably be this size right here. I'm not too big on severity.
Okay, in regard to that, do you ever use or recommend twisted wire snaffle bits?
Twisted wire. Okay, one of the hardest things I ever had to learn, and I think any horseman has to learn about, is feel. And that I couldn't understand it when my teacher explained it to me. How do you know that? How do you know this? How do you know that? My instructor would come back to me and she would say, you need to learn how to read your horse. You need to learn how to feel it. And then she got after me one day. She said, 90% of the kids out here in this class aren't even reading their horse. She goes, you're not reading your horse, that's why you don't even know. She goes, do you know what you have to do? I'm like, what do I have to do? Go sit out there and watch them. Watch them interact. You're going to see their ears move. You're going to see their eyes move. They're going to move in a certain way that they're talking with each other. And she goes, once you comprehend that, you're going to learn how to feel. You're going to learn how to manipulate it so that it can work for you. So, back to your question with your twisted snaffle, it depends on how I feel the horse's mouth and how he responds to me. I don't know any other way to describe that concept, but that's the best I can do it. But these are the tools I use when I work with my different horses in different stages. So let me see.
For bell, I got a question.
Go
For
ahead.
bell racing, would you use a different bit altogether? If you.
There is a lot of different bell racing bits out there. So, and it depends on the horse again. When I started out, I used a combination bit, which is on the mare that I just sold, this is what I used on her. Because she was soft in the mouth, and she could move off my legs. All I would really have to do was slow her down and just drop the rein. But this is what I used on her, and what I also use interchangeably when I rode.
Growing up, it's funny, all we had was the sheep herder bit, just the regular grazing bit. I didn't know all these things then, but it worked.
One thing I forgot to add, when a bit sits in your horse's mouth, you're going to look on the side of your horse's mouth. And to know whether or not it fits, it's usually the general rule, 2 wrinkles in his mouth to adjust the sides. Or some horses like to hold a bit in their mouth. So that's fine too. There doesn't have to be wrinkles, but just enough support up here that it doesn't fall out of his mouth. Okay. I just want to go over it and be clear about how this one works. When I pull on my rein, what happens is that this curb bit will move up towards the palate. This will put pressure on his chin. When this shape moves upwards, it's going to put the pressure on his ears. And then there's no pressure, there's no space in here between this curb, so this pressure is going to lay on his tongue. It's going to squish his tongue. This here is called a throat latch, and this just goes behind the horse's chin and secures the bit on his head. Other than that, anybody have any questions?
I got a question. When you go to the feed store, you see like, I think the done bits.
Okay.
There's some with the dog bone, there's what they call lifesaver,